Okay, so we are back to understanding about PAM. So, if you remember, the way PAM works is that it knows that goals have plans and plans have actions. So, if you hear a sentence in a story, if it is one of these things that you were expecting to hear about, then you can say that yes, I know that, I understand that. Otherwise, if you are looking at an action, you infer a plan and say that is this a plan that this character may have? If that is an expectation or a prediction, then you can accept it. Otherwise, you say can this plan be part of a goal that this character have? And if that happens and that is met as a prediction, then you understand the story. So, that was the general way of doing things. So, let us look at this story about bicycle. John wanted Bill's bicycle. He walked over to Bill. This is a story that we are listening to. How do you understand this story? Using goals and plans. And asked him if he would give it to him. Bill refused. Then John told Bill he would give him $5 for it essentially, but Bill would not agree essentially. John told Bill he would break his arm if he didn't let him have it, and Bill let John have the bicycle. Now, if you have heard this story, then you should be able to answer such questions as to, okay, he wanted Bill's bicycle, but why did he walk over to Bill? Then if you know how things happen, how goals and plans and actions interact, then you would be able to say that he walked over to Bill because he wanted to ask him for his bicycle. So, when we say John wanted Bill's bicycle, we say that there is a conceptualization that this bicycle which is possessed by Bill is desired by John essentially, and that is a goal that John has, that the bicycle which is possessed by Bill should be possessed by John, and that is a goal that John has. The second sentence is John walked over to Bill and asked him for it. So, we have already said that ask is a plan box and it can be used. So, this is in general what is going to be happening there, that there are two themes, that either John likes the bicycle or John wants to ride the bicycle. This is one of the reasons why he may have wanted the bicycle. And so, we will not question beyond these as to why he wanted the bicycle. So, the goal was that John wants to possess Bill's bicycle. The outcome was unknown at that point. Then he used the plan of asking, and the action was to John ask Bill. But for him to be able to ask Bill, he would have to be near Bill to be able to ask him, and that is why he walked over to Bill essentially. So, the explanation for the action of why he walked over to Bill is found is that he wanted to ask him for it, and ask becomes a prediction. The full story would be represented like this: John wanted to possess Bill's bicycle, and the first plan was asking, the second plan was bargaining, the third plan was threatening, and the threatening was by saying that John telling Bill that if he does not give him the bicycle, he will break the arm. This invoked in Bill the preservation theme, which is to maintain health, which led to the plan of complying with the request of please give me your bicycle, and the complying with that request, that plan involved giving the bicycle to John. So, that was the action that we see in the end. So, we will quickly go through this like we did in the case of listening to seeing how Sam is solving stories. We will not go over the detail very much essentially. So, this is the same story that we just saw, and The first input is John wanted Bill's bicycle. Then it goes through the same process. This LE invokes conceptual dependency theory, and then we start reasoning with the conceptualization. So, we have already seen that this statement is represented by saying that one actor has a goal. Hume 0 is John, that in the future that he wanted something. That is not a predicted input, and it begins searching for an explanation using bottom up search, and it looks at this rule of D-control episode request. Remember, request is just another name for a rule to handle D-control episode. So, what is really happening in the story? The explanation is that there is a D-control goal that one actor has. So far nothing is confirmed. Why does he want it? Now, we saw that there are two themes that could explain that. Use vehicle fondness, and that explains why he wants it. Does he want to use it, or is he fond of? So, there are two requests here. One is this use vehicle request, and the other is this fondness request. So, there are two ways in which you can understand why he wants it. Either he wants to use a vehicle, or he likes vehicles. So, explanation found in the fondness this thing, and so we do not question it any further. We stop the bottom of inference process, and move forward from there. So, we have a story now, adding to the story representation, loading predictions, that some attempt to satisfy the D-control goal will be made, and there is a planner, that is John, who would do something. So, if he hears something about this goal, then that will be the explanation for whatever we are listening to. However, the next input is he walked over to Bill, which does not seem to be connected with that, and that of course, we know by now that walking over is represented by this P transaction. So, Hume 2 to the proximity part of P 1 and so on. We did not expect to hear about walking. So, we try to go into a bottom up mode. Why is he walking towards Bill? Tam will find a series of explanations, because he had a plan to be near Bill, because he had a goal of being near Bill, because that was instrumental. It is part of the plan to get the bicycle. So, it is inferring that there is a goal, and he is using a plan box called walk, and so we are understanding that when he say he walked over, then that is a plan that he is using to get near this other person who is Bill. And asked him if he would give it to him. So, that we are now familiar with by now. This is an M-trans event, in which the object of M-trans is this thing that Hume 4 should A-trans some physical object to Hume 3 in this thing. If that happens, then it would lead to this Hume 3 going to a value of happiness, which is we incremented by a certain amount. It would make John very happy. So, this M trans is happening to the conscious processor of Hume 4 essentially. This is also not a predicted event. The predicted event was that he had this goal of wanting Bill's bicycle. Then we figure out that this is a plan that he is using, which is ask to satisfy the goal of getting Bill's bicycle. So, that is the explanation, that there is a plan box called ask, which the planner is using. So, that this goal of A-transing the bicycle will happen. Pam did expect to hear about a plan, and this prediction was set up when the goal D-CONT was recognized. So, whenever you see that you have a goal of getting hold of something, you can create an expectation that there would be a plan which will be a plan to get hold of the thing, and the plan was the ask plan. So, all that is then added to the story representation. So, the story representation says that the plan is to ask this other person Bill for this thing, and then we expect to hear two things. One is that there would be a goal compliance, or there could be a refusal of the goal. So, at this stage, after understanding that John is asking Bill, Pam will set up these two expectations, that either the goal will be met or the goal will be refused. When one of these is met, the other is removed essentially. So, Bill declined or something like that, Bill refused is this thing, and which is again an M-trans event, as you can see, and the entrance of this thing is that he will not do something, which is that he will not give him the bicycle, and this is from towards this conscious processor of John. So, that was not an expected event. We expected to hear that either the goal would be succeed or it would be this thing. Now, it is looking for an explanation offered for why is Bill telling no to John, and then the explanation is that the Bill had this plan of telling John that he will not A-trans the object to him. So, that not is captured in the form here, which basically says negative essentially. And then you recognize that saying no is part of the plan of declining the request, which is the decision that Bill has made. So, informed decision is the goal that he has, and he wants John to know that he will not give him the bicycle. So, one of those expectations is met now. So, Pan moves to the incorporation mode, it adds all that to the story, which we will skip over this a little bit. So, in Pam's story, all these things are explicit, that there was a plan, there was a goal, and of course, the same thing is repeated here, as you will see. So, everything is very explicit and detailed. Pam also infers that Bill wanted to keep his bicycle, that he has this goal, and his refusal to part was part of a plan to keep it. He does not want to give the bicycle, therefore, he is saying that I will not give you the bicycle. So, then John tries bargaining. So, again he tells Bill something. So, the sentence is he told Bill he would give him $5 for that. So, this is again an M trans event, as you can see, and it basically involves this A trans, and it says that if you A trans a bike to me, I will A trans $5 to you essentially. So, that object is money essentially. So, there is this role merge which is happening, which we are not, because every time it reads a sentence, it creates tokens, and then it has to figure out that it's the same person that we are talking about. The processing for bargain is similar to that of ask. And finally, John resorts to a threat. So, we have already seen how to represent a threat when we were looking at conceptual dependency theory. Basically, you M-trans something which says that if you do something, then it will lead to something essentially. If hum1 does something, so remember these are actions, then hum0 will do something which will lead to hum1's arm being broken, for example. So, that will become -5 or something. So, this is a talk event, and eventually Pam has to figure out that this talk event is part of the plan of threatening him, and then it will understand that why is he saying what he is saying essentially. So, he figures out that there is a plan box called threaten, which is what John is using, and the rest of the thing is repeated below. The found an explanation that there is going to be a threaten. So, it goes into the incorporation mode and adds all this to the story representation that there is a plan of threatening Bill. Okay, so, we will skip some of that. John has made a threat, and Pam will look for again either compliance or some evasive action essentially. That Bill will either comply with the threat or will try to run away, or whatever is the evasive action that is available to him. And it is kind of put in a marker saying that let me know the result of this happening essentially. So, it so happens that in this case Bill complies. So, Bill gave him the bicycle, which is basically a transing the bicycle to John, and it confirms a prediction. So, the outcome is that the goal of D-control, of getting hold of the bicycle of the planner, has succeeded, but it still cannot understand why Bill gave the bicycle, and so it is not a predictive. So, John's goal has succeeded, but Pam has not understood why Bill gave the bicycle. So, it goes to a bottom up mode even though the prediction has been made. So, to cut a long story short, uh, Bill did Bill have a plan of giving the bicycle to John? Then he must have had the goal of giving the bicycle to John, and there was this threat comply request. That this plan is basically to comply with the threat essentially. So, the goal of John has succeeded, and you have inferred a goal of maintaining health that Bill has essentially. So, it would not have been possible for him to maintain his health if he had insisted on keeping his bicycle. At which point Pam has finished reading the story, and then as before you can ask questions of Pam. Why did John walk over to Bill? Because he wanted to get his bicycle. Why did Bill give his bicycle to John? Because he didn't want to get hurt. These are actual output generated by Pam. What were the consequences of John's walking over to Bill? This enabled him to ask him to give him Bill's bicycle. What were the consequences of John's asking Bill to give him the bicycle? Bill told him that he wouldn't give it to him essentially. Now, we know that walking over to Bill is a sub plan which is part of a sub goal of being near Bill, but the long term goal is that because he wanted the bicycle, and Pam is actually giving you that answer. Why did John walk over to Bill? Because he wanted the bicycle and he wanted to ask him for the bicycle, and therefore he walked over to Bill to ask him for the bicycle. Then we can ask the two actors to produce their version of the story. So, this is John's version. I wanted to get Bill's bicycle, so I walked over to him and then I asked him to hand it over. He told me that he wouldn't hand it over. So, I asked him to sell it to me for $5. Then he told me that he wouldn't hand over his bicycle. I told him that if he didn't hand over, then I would break his arm, and he handed over his bicycle. So, that is John's version of the story, and we can also listen to Bill's version of the story. This is all generated by Pam. John came over, he asked me to give him my bicycle. I wanted to keep the bicycle, so I told him that I won't give it to him. Then he offered to buy it for $5. I wanted to keep the bicycle, so I told him that I won't give it to him. He told me that if I didn't give it to him, then he would break my arm. I didn't want to get hurt, so I gave him my bicycle. So, you can see that this run, which is reported in the book that I spoke about in the beginning, was done in 1978. This is 2 years after the run that I presented to you about Sam, which was done in 1976. So, all this work was happening in the late 70s in Yale. So, having listened to this long and sad tale from Bill's perspective, we will take a break and come back and look at how Pam works essentially.